Hello and welcome, fellow motorsports fans. We didn't quite have the usual packed single-seater race week because, well, most big series are in their summer break, but that doesn't mean there hasn't been anything relevant for us feeder series fans. Quite the opposite, in fact, because we're at the conclusion of the FIA European Karting Championship in the direct drive classes, so in the ones most relevant for us feeder series fans, because this is where all the kids are competing that we are going to see in F4 and F3 and F2 in the years to come. So I'm here to give you a quick rundown of the protagonists in this championship. Let's go. As is tradition on the channel, we begin with the slowest of the classes, and in this case it is the FIA Academy, not in fact part of the European Championship, a bit of a separate category. You can almost call it a feeder to the European Championship, I suppose, although in karting it is a little bit more complex. This is a series with a spec chassis and engine, so no teams competing, and here talent from all over the world can showcase their skills, and the one who did so most is 12-year-old Belgian driver Gilles Herman, and he has been nothing but excellent throughout this season, and in particular we can highlight the last race. It is only a 3-round championship, the FIA Academy Trophy, and even though he had the championship more or less locked in already going into the final, at the very least once it became clear that he was actually going to have a decent race in the final, he still went on to drive incredibly aggressively and work his way forward through the pretty competitive upper mid pack, and like it was wet conditions throughout the final day. This will be a pattern in the other classes as well. And he didn't just settle for like a solid P4 finish to take home the championship or anything, and instead he went full hunger mode and actually charged all the way to P2 on track as well to take the title in style. Now, this is the kind of behavior where with an older, more experienced driver, you'd think, probably a bit unnecessarily risky. You are risking the championship to get 1 or 2 on-track positions. But obviously from a super young and hungry driver, this is exactly the behavior you want to see, really, where he's not just content taking the title, he wants to style on people, and he did. His main rival throughout the season was Swiss driver Dan Allemann, who I personally am a big fan of, and he was the guy who actually dominated this particular race weekend. He blitzed the final in style. Unfortunately, so far his season hasn't been too stellar, where he lost the win in the first round with a bit of a dodgy on-track incident, and then in Slovakia he just didn't have the greatest race weekend all around. So unfortunately he was basically out of the title fight, but then again he did secure P2. He is also a bit younger than Herman, and just in general a kid to watch in the future years, no doubt about it. It's cool to see in this particular series that there are lots of different nationalities competing and doing well. I want to highlight Slovakia and Sri Lanka doing quite well with Jakub Gasparovic and Rian Damodasa. I hope that's remotely correctly pronounced. Either way, those two were, in the front running spots throughout the weekend and in the championship as well, so great performances there. But since I'm not too familiar with their careers otherwise, I can't spend too much time talking about them, and instead I do want to highlight some female talent, because that name has been thrown around a couple of times recently in the news, and that's Ivonne Simonova, the Austrian girl currently racing in this particular championship. And yes, she finished in P21. That's not great by any stretch of the imagination. She didn't really have any results to write home about whatsoever. But I do want to point out that doesn't quite tell the full story, because there has been flashes of pace and, brilliance is maybe pushing it a little, but she has shown that she can drive at very specific times. It's just that the consistency is really nowhere. But she has recently been announced as part of the More Than Equal program, so I thought she deserves a bit of a shout, and she is certainly one that I am carefully, looking out for going forward. But don't mistake her for one of the proper big female talents out there, because they do in fact exist. Now, to the first of the proper big European Championship categories, the OK Juniors. This is really the one where drivers age 12 to 15-ish are all competing, and here it's the man whose name you may have seen recently in the news as well. Dries van Langendonck, Belgian racing driver, recently signed to the McLaren Junior program, and he absolutely dominated this championship throughout the series, really. Yes, in this particular weekend, he only settled for P2, which, by the way, thus means it's his worst result of the year. He won 2 of the finals and got 2 P2s in the others. Absolutely ridiculous results in terms of the consistency. In case you've never watched any of these championships, just making the final consistently means you're probably a pretty decent racing driver, and sure, the bar is higher if you want to be talked about as, you know, a potential F1 prospect in the future and things like this. But making it into the podium battle every race is a big achievement. Actually bringing it home every weekend is ridiculous. So congratulations there. Dries van Langendonck, absolutely one to watch out for, and for me personally, top 2 talent in this particular category all year long. The guy who won the weekend and dominated the weekend, really, Spaniard Christian Costoya, is just outside of my personal top 2, but, you know, probably 3rd, and also having a fantastic season, not just in the European Championship, but throughout the year across the various karting championships he is competing in. So definitely also a name you do want to keep an eye out for. My personal highlight though, and the other guy who so far has been the main rival to Dries van Langendonck throughout OK Junior in not just this championship but all the other ones as well, is Austrian Niklas Schaufler. Now, I want to say Red Bull adjacent is probably the best way of putting it, not part of the academy, but now he's got some sort of sponsorship since a few weeks as well, and he has absolutely been one of the most promising drivers last year already. And he has had the kind of very satisfying like a development curve where last year it was clear to see that he's got the pace and was clear to see that he can win races and things, but it never quite clicked. And this season everything came together, especially in the first half of the year. Yes, the European Championship itself hasn't been so kind to him, hence why he wasn't really in the title fight, but make no mistake, he is absolutely up there in this category. He's also going to turn 15 in January, so at least to me personally, it's going to be very interesting to see what he does. Will he step up to F4 next year? Will he do a year in seniors, maybe a dual program of seniors and shifter karts? That would probably be my preferred option if I was him, but definitely we'll watch out and see what Niklas Schaufler will be up to. I can guarantee you he is a name you will hear a lot more often in the coming years. Another one of those names, which we'll hear in the coming years, is Mercedes Junior Kenzo Craigie, who they've just signed for this season. And he's had a bit of an interesting year really throughout, where it's been very up and down, very hit or miss. But again, you can clearly see the potential, and you can see why Merck might have been interested in signing him. And at least he did finish the European Championship on a high with his best performance yet. He's been very strong throughout the weekend, finished I believe in P6, so something to build on. Not a stellar season or anything to remember, but if he stays around in the category for another year, I would definitely expect him to be right at the sharp end for not just race weekends but championships. Now, in this category, there are so many incredibly exciting and interesting names and people we will talk about lots and lots in the coming weeks and months and years. So I will just quickly shout out a list of names like Jacopo Martinezzi, Roman Kamyap, Filippo Sala, Noah Baglin, Joel Pocola, Scott Marsh, Dean Hugendorn, Rocco Coronel, Ian Kraling, and the list goes on and on and on. So it was really difficult to sort of pick and choose who we can talk about in this very time limited format, and I have decided to pick out one of the stars of this particular weekend, Kit Belowski, the 14-year-old UK racer, and he absolutely stunned everyone, not in the actual qualifying or the heats on Friday and Saturday morning and everything, but instead on the Sunday when the wet weather kicked in. This kid just found a whole different level to, honestly, most of the field were in the superheat and the final. He gained almost 20 positions each to finish very high up the order. Yes, in the final he got penalized after the fact and only finished down in P7 after starting at like around P30-ish. So incredible wet weather performance, and certainly, you know, just a type of performance you'll be remembered for, even if maybe the rest of your season or career so far hasn't been quite as stellar. Last but not least in the karting world, there's also the okay, well, just okay category, the seniors we call them. This is the category open to every drivers 15 and above, 14 and above in terms of age, actually, correct, sorry there. And the championship winner, in fact, is a guy you may have seen racing in British F4 if you've been around for a couple of years, and that's Joe Turney. So just by this alone, you can guess, unfortunately, a name not particularly relevant going forward for feeder series fans because he's already in his 20s. But for him personally, this is a fantastic storyline. And I guess as a fan of this championship, it is a fantastic storyline. He's been close to winning this title a few times now. He's finally secured it. And what makes it a lot more satisfying a result is the fact that he had a really horrific injury at the World Championship last year, which I'm not going to show this clip here because it's a bit not disgusting, you know, but let's just say he decided to push his kart back onto an active racetrack, and you know, he thought he let the old field pass, but he didn't. There was another kart coming behind him and drove right into his ankle. So, you know, not the kind of injury you want to see on live television normally. So it's really glad to see him bounce back like this and, you know, take the title in a very controlled fashion. His main rival to the title is a guy you might also be familiar with if you've been paying attention this year, and that's Gabriel Gomes, the Brazilian/Italian racer. I'm not too sure what the status is there. Ace driver for CRG and currently also doing a Spanish F4 season. So this guy would have absolutely been in my list of top 5 karting graduates for this year. Unfortunately, I didn't know he was actually going to graduate this time around, but while doing his Spanish F4 campaign, which is going pretty well, he is also still trying to finally secure a European karting title, and yet again he missed out in P2, much like last year. Very sad story here, but there is no denying how rapid Gabriel Gomes is, and he was fighting until the very last minute here, and it was a very fitting last round of the championship with him fighting Joe Turney every step along the way, in the wet, in the dry, in the superheat, in the final. And yeah, what can I say? He really tried everything. Unfortunately, it was too far gone by this point. Another name who's going to pop up at some point in the very near future in the Formula Cars, I hope, is Thibaut Ramekes. Another Belgian. There's a lot of Belgian talent coming up the ranks. I don't really know what's going on here. And he is the genetically engineered perfect racing driver, just by the fact that he is incredibly tiny but can drive karts like no one else really. He is absolutely rapid. Unfortunately, he got a little bit ruined with the wet weather. He was struggling a lot more in the wet than his taller competitors that can use the weight a bit more effectively. Either way, stunning kid. I think he secured P3 in the championship, very deserved, even though he's been a little unlucky at times anyway. So another name we do need to pay attention to. Loris Werrell, last year's OKJ European champion, has very quickly adjusted to the seniors, but unfortunately again the European Championship hasn't been too kind to him, hence why maybe the end result isn't as impressive. But again, do not get confused by this. He's absolutely a top tier karting driver at this level, and personally I would be really looking forward to next year if he stays around and if Dries van Langendonck steps up to the OK category and we can get a rematch of them. They are teammates at Forza, so I would personally love to see that duel one more year. Once again here, we have a lot of possible mentions of very interesting characters. Jimmy Helias, for example, star of the late season, or the ever unlucky Tony Kart ace, David Walter, Premo Boy, Salim Hana, and many more. But because we can't talk about all of them yet again, I do want to highlight one who might not be able to go to Formula Racing anytime soon just by looking at his career trajectory. And it's yet another Belgian driver somehow. That's all a coincidence, believe it or not, and it's Kai Rillerts. This guy is fantastic in senior karting, in my opinion. He is new to this top level of the competition this year as a Saudi kart factory driver. Unfortunately, he has had the definition of an unlucky season, barely able to survive any of the superheats and finals seemingly, so very disappointing on the results side of things. But on the pure performance side of things, he has been up there from day one. Interestingly, I believe he signed at the beginning of the season for Tony Kart and then switched very, very quickly. And ever since he switched to Saudi, it's been going pretty well, at least again in raw performance, if not results. And this time he finally got rewarded for his effort and actually managed to secure the result on track as well. He was briefly even leading the race, I believe. He brought home P2 on track. Unfortunately, he did get penalized off the podium post-race. So again, not quite the result he deserves, but at the very least, he finally got to show something. And look, he is 17. He's been racing in, well, I don't want to call them lesser championship. That always sounds a bit mean, but like just in less expensive competition. So if I would have to guess, I'd say he is struggling to fund the way out of karts. So just let me tell you, he absolutely deserves it. And if you see him in a Formula Car next year, just be very happy about it because, well, he'll be great. Anyway, talking about Formula Cars, there was some F4 racing, so let's go there. There's been a lot of Formula racing this weekend, but the Central European F4 did compete, and here we now have a pretty good idea of what the actual packing order is at the front of the field. There's still Odcar Wurz and Kirill Kutzkov battling for the championship, more or less. Wurz still very much in control. And we now, I think, can safely say it's Max Karen and Miroslav Mikash as the two local talents that are actually able to put up a fight in some races more than others, but you know, they are at the sharp end of these grids. Mikash now found his first win in a controlled fashion in the first race, and Kahan also found another one by sort of very surprisingly finding some late race pace to pass both Odcar Wurz and Kirill Kutzkov for the win in the third race. So definitely two guys we hope to see in different, more competitive championships next year maybe. Odcar Wurz still remains the championship leader and on paper the most interesting guy to watch, but he really had a bit of a struggle weekend here. P3 as a best result, just given the small and not super competitive grid, is a bit not great considering his championship ambition. And race 2 in particular was just a mental wet weather roller coaster. You know, we've rarely seen things like it, but I believe even he in particular already had a run like this year. So a bit of an odd one. First, he got run wide by Karan while battling for the lead and, you know, got sent down the order a little down to like P7-ish, I want to say. He then fought his way back to the lead within minutes, so very, very rapidly, only for him to then make another error, slowly slipping down the championship order, eventually allowing Mikash past, and then he wasn't quite able to accept this fact that looked like, did outbrake himself a little, ran into the back of Mikash and therefore finished his race in the gravel. So what a turn of events from bad, well, undeserved bad to greatness to terrible, so not great. Fortunately, Mikash didn't end up wrecked. He actually could just bring it home in P2, so at the very least some satisfaction here. So yeah, Odcar definitely the, like I said, most interesting guy to watch in this. Probably still the quickest, but he is really struggling to string together consistently clean race weekends, or just even one properly clean race weekend, and that's something he really needs to sort out if he wants to be competitive in the more competitive championships. There are a couple new names in this championship, and only one last name, but two first names, and that is Philippe and Jean-Paul Carras, French-Greek, I believe, crossover, whatever, twin brothers, karting graduates. I've seen them a little bit in karting, but not so much. I can tell you they are typically pretty close in performance with each other, so no big difference there at the very least, and I think this is something that translated reasonably well to their first single-seater outing, although Philippe was looking like the, better adjusted of the two and actually sort of found himself in a best of the rest kind of role and even fighting at the sharp end when the battling was a little more intense and slowing down the lead group. So from him in particular, it was a very impressive weekend, I thought. Unfortunately, his brother got a little more unlucky and even got a DNS in the third race for reasons that I haven't looked into. So not the perfect debut, but I do hope both of them can stick around for the remainder of the season to spice up the competition a little bit. On the other side of the globe, we also had Japanese F4, and again here it's a bit of a similar story. We are just trying to figure out the pecking order at the sharp end in particular, and here it is Yuto Nomura, Ryota Horashi, Hironbu Shimizu and Tosei Moriyama that are a clear cut above the rest. These four are typically in the top 4 positions in the first race. This is actually how they finished together, with Horashi in full control, but you know, never quite clear and under no pressure and everything. And the second race, unfortunately, was, let's just say, a little more eventful. First, we had Nomura giving up the lead to Shimizu and then spinning himself out moments after, so that was already a bit odd. And then the other 3 did run away together for a little bit, only for a last lap clash between Horashi and Moriyama to result in a spin for Moriyama, so therefore only 2 out of these top 4 competitors actually got the results to show for it. With 2 key championship contenders giving up points, Horashi is now actually back in the lead of the championship ahead of Nomura and Shimizu, despite scoring the weird engine-related DNS in the first round. If you remember, there was big engine issues in the Japanese Formula 4. So still very much a wide open championship with, to be fair, more than half of the season to go. Quick shout out to Kento Omiya for his maiden podium after a very long scrap against teammate Rintaro Sato. And here I do have a question for you guys. If you've seen the race, if you've been reading about the race, did he get a post-race penalty by any chance? Sato, that is, because they were battling on track as a pretty cool like teammate fight, fun to watch. And I thought Sato took P3 from him on track and then finished like well down post-race. So I think that might have been a penalty, but if you know more, please let me know. Unfortunately, well, I say unfortunately, there was also Australian F4, which should have been a good thing, but unfortunately there wasn't any broadcast for it. So you know the rules, no broadcast, no reason for me to talk about it. We can just say Jimmy Pizzi continues his utter dominance of the series with yet another triple, and Nicolas Stati also secured 3 second places. So really, I think even if I had been able to watch the races, there probably wouldn't have been too much to talk about it. Anyway, that was it from me for this week. A bit of a different topic this time around. Let me know all of your thoughts about karting drivers in particular, if you have any, down in the comments, or drop in any questions about current karting drivers, because I know not everybody has the time to follow these championships as well, but I do, so I am more than happy to share my observations. Anyway, thank you all for watching, and I hope to catch you in the next one.